Sit back and relax. You're listening to the Wealth Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Greg Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. My guest for this episode was David Benskin, founder and CEO of Wealth Access. We spoke about the problem, fragmented client data, the solution, Wealth Access's ability to aggregate and unify that data, some of their challenges, including selling into enterprise wealth management firms like banks, and some opportunities around AI governance, and the future outlook of AI for these types of products. So before we start the interview, let me do a quick Ezra Group plug. Building wealth tech software is difficult, but for most firms, the real challenge is in product development. It's figuring out how to actually sell into the wealth management industry. Ezra Group helps wealth tech firms accelerate that process. For more than 2 decades, we've advised RIAs, broker-dealers, custodians, and enterprise wealth firms on the technology vendors they are working with. We understand how these firms evaluate tech, how they make buying decisions, and why many vendor sales strategies fail. We work with wealth tech providers on go-to-market strategies, competitive analysis, and other positioning and distribution planning, specifically for the wealth management industry. So if your wealth tech is trying to grow revenue, improve your market positioning, or break into larger enterprise relationships, you need to run, not walk, to our website, ezragroup.com, and click the beautiful purple Contact Us button on the homepage to schedule a call. And now, my standard housekeeping chores. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Please check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And if you're a software vendor in the wealth management space, make sure to register your product at our Wealth Tech Integration Score vendor portal at ezragroup.com/register so that your product's Wealth Tech Integration Score will always be up to date. And now, let's kick this thing off. All right, here we are with our next guest on the program. It is David Benskin, founder and CEO of Wealth Access. David, great to finally have you here.
Glad to be here. Good to connect with you, Craig.
Yes, it is good. We're having a great summer. Where are you calling in from?
We're in Nashville, Tennessee, Music
Love
City.
It. Great place, Music City. Yep, I go there a couple times a year. There's always a conference or something in Nashville. It's a fantastic place, great for live music. I'm in New Jersey, as everyone knows, and fortunately, the heat wave is broken, but now we're going to talk about tech. A lot of tech to talk about. But before we do, could you, from Nashville, give us a 30-second elevator pitch for Wealth Access?
Yeah. So Wealth Access is a connected wealth platform. Essentially, what we do in the wealth tech and specifically bank-affiliated enterprise wealth firms is enable them to, unify their data, have conversations with their clients and grow their business. I think part of it in terms of where we started was really around, unifying data, and we bring in the intelligence. It's more about, how can you actually, provide better advice, do things with that data to really be able to activate that data. So we work with about 60 financial institutions. Business has been growing, been in existence for over a decade now. So glad to share more with you today.
We're going to dig in. We're going to go deep on this. So just to set things up. So advisors for years have been having these problems with data. Their clients asking for information about different accounts, and maybe they don't really know about it. And this is why, at least the things we've seen, like in Cerulli data, that data aggregation ranks as a very high factor for advisors when they're choosing technology, and how difficult it is to deliver a complete unified picture. So you've spent, before you did Wealth Access, you were a decade at Merrill Lynch. So what was the exact moment you realized that advisors and clients were flying blind and needed some sort of tool to unify that?
I think it's a good question. I don't think there was one specific time, or I guess there was one, but there were a few experiences that led up to that. So as an advisor, was a partner of a private banking investment group team. So you always make that call to your clients trying to understand their balance sheet. And I remember calling a client down in Atlanta and I said, you've got this 401k. Can you tell me what's in your account? And his response was stocks. And I said, well, what stock? Because I don't know, it's diversified. And I was like, can you send me the statement or, pass the information along? And I ended up looking at it. And it was two ETFs. It was like an emerging market ETF and an energy ETF. And I was like, that's not really that diversified. And I realized at that point, there's like, it's not just the advisors, it's clients. And so you really have to dig in, and it's difficult for them to understand what they have. And so always spent a lot of time, my team had 50 different spreadsheets for 50 different clients, putting in, account balances and any information that we could discover. But there was another point in time, and it was during the global financial crisis. So being at Merrill Lynch, the firm was actually going under, right? And people were worried. We had just seen, Bear Stearns and what was going on. And so clients were calling just simply saying, am I going to be okay? And I remember like saying, yes, I think you are going to be okay, but I didn't really know because I didn't know, everything that they had. I didn't have a line of sight into seeing, their total balance sheet and what their liquidity was. And so, always been very, curious and into technology, throughout my decade or so there. But I think part of launching Wealth Access was not really to launch a technology company. It's always been to solve, that key problem that you described around data. And I think it gets into just being able to have conversations where I think advisors really thrive, where, it's not going and getting the information. It's really being able to, help clients, make important decisions. And part of that starts with understanding on both sides what they have and how you can help.
You talk about data unification as different from aggregation. Now, most people in our audience, I think, would use those words interchangeably. So can you explain what's the distinction between those, especially when it comes to a bank or other enterprise firms and their bottom line?
That's a good question too.
They're all good questions, David. I only
well,
ask
it's a
good
lot
questions.
to unpack. You threw in the bottom line part, which I actually think is important as well. But the way we describe it is you are unifying or aggregating data, but if you think about what is, or the way we think about unification is more institutional integration. Meaning that if you're a financial institution, you may have multiple lines of business. So let's say you're a regional or a community bank. You have a retail bank client business. You have a business banking or commercial. Then you have wealth, and then within wealth, you may have brokerage business. You may have a trust business. You have a private bank. You may have an RIA. You may have an insurance company. So if you start to think about multiple lines of business, each one of those lines of businesses has underlying core systems, whether it's custody or accounting, trust, or performance accounting or performance reporting. And so when we view, integration, it's really providing, an aggregated view of those direct data sources where aggregation, I would say that's more client or self-directed aggregation. And everybody knows the key players out there. And the experience there is, whether it's open banking, screen scraping, or however you're getting that you're aggregating that data, it requires clients, to take action, which is I have a, Schwab account. Here's my username, password, mother's maiden name, street I grew up on. It, scrapes the data and pulls it in. So, I would describe it as being able to see all of the data that is being managed by that financial institution, or they have access to those data sources as really unification. And they actually work well together because, the reality is a lot of financial institutions, may not manage everything on the client's balance sheet, whether it's a credit card or, outside investments. That's where aggregation fits in. I think the other part is to the bottom line. I think it's really important. So we mentioned earlier, we work with a lot of banks, and the engagement aspect of these financial institutions, they may have multiple ways to log in or multiple ways to see their data, or for their clients to see their accounts there. The reality is there's a massive opportunity in that market, and specifically being able to, fully support clients through their entire journey across those multiple lines. And so, I mean, it tends to drive a lot of growth, which is, pretty significant. We actually partnered with a consulting firm to actually run some of the numbers. So we'll get to that in a minute, but it's significant in terms of what the growth opportunities are. But it really starts with just being able to see the data and really connect with clients and advisors.
That's the way to go. You really got to connect. Thank you for that answer. That was very detailed and impressive. Right. So you mentioned Wealth Access has been around for over a decade. I think you started in 2011. So that's 15 years, decade and a half. So share with us, like, as a CEO and a founder, what is an assumption you made in your early years that turned out to be completely wrong?
I think it's a good question. I think from, the early, stages of the company, I mean, we always, the initial proof of concept when I, launched the company was, could we go get, individual investors to utilize the solution? Do they want to see a dashboard on their smartphone where they could see their own information? And that was really a proof of concept. We got to that relatively quick. But I think that one of the things that I didn't understand is really how complex it is in the enterprise space, and how competitive it is, even within certain financial institutions. And so a good example of that is, at let's say a regional bank where they have a commercial bank, they have a wealth management business, they have the retail business, and they don't always, work well together. And I think it's really trying to understand the importance of, specifically wealth within the overall bank, business. And I think there's, a lot of political capital at the banks and trying to get them to understand it. And I think that was one of the early challenges that we had, but have, seen when it starts to, diversify a bank's balance sheet and drive shareholder value, you start to see where, banks work as one to really support their clients. But it was certainly one of the challenges, an assumption that, I made, that I was pretty wrong in understanding that.
Thank you for sharing that. Part of your pitch at Wealth Access is connecting legacy bank and trust infrastructure without having to rip anything out. So here at Ezra Group, we do a lot of work on integrations. We have our integration research, and we help wealth management firms integrate their technology better. So from your point of view, what is harder? Is it the actual technical integration work, or convincing the bank's IT teams to trust a third party sitting on top of their core systems?
I think those are, two good questions as well. I think part of it is, a lot of the core systems, as you know, and your research has been great to, make that available to really move the industry forward, because it's not like there's something wrong with those core systems. They're just designed to solve a specific, challenge. And then there's those that say that they're the end-to-end platform as well. Where we really fit in is that, Wealth Access acts as kind of the orchestration layer of, you can go through a conversion. We actually have clients that have done that. M&A has picked up quite a bit, and we work well in those instances. But you don't really necessarily have to do that to improve the experience. But the challenge is making the systems work together. So, for example, let's say you have a brokerage and a trust business, and maybe there's a client that has both products, or both types of accounts. They shouldn't have to log into one and then log into the other. They should be able to see their information really as one, and really have that clarity in terms of from an experience. And so I think part of the challenge is really, those systems are not really designed to work together. A lot of the legacy systems, innovation is not where they're making most of their investments really on the experience side. So we fit in really well. The other part of your question is interesting in terms of convincing the IT. One of the topics that came up at the Connected Wealth Forum. So we had over 30 financial institutions, just kind of a peer-to-peer discussion. So we just facilitate the discussion. It happened to be in Nashville. It happened to be the night of a rodeo. So we that was the theme is listening to these heads of wealth talking about some of the challenges that they have. And we came up with what we thought we called the 5 yeses. There's the wealth champion that says, yes, we need to do this. We want to have a better client experience. We want our clients to really not have to log into multiple systems to see the money that we're managing. Makes sense. When you get into the IT, that's the other yes is kind of that Silicon Valley CTO IT department that says, hey, we're going to do this ourselves. And it's a big challenge, right? And a lot of the institutions that we work with, they have multi-year data projects. They're trying to accomplish the same thing. It gets very expensive, very time-consuming. They buy another institution, and they're buying more systems. And they're typically really good with retail and business banking data. Wealth is really complex, right? When you start to get into principal and income or tax lots, wealth is, a very complex set of data. And so part of overcoming that is understanding that, we can partner with them. They can still do it themselves, but, we can really cut a lot of their projects in half or even shorter, and bring with them a level of expertise in terms of doing it. So I would also go beyond, just those 2 yeses. You still need to convince the head of digital at the organization, and then you've got to get the bank decision makers, typically the C-suite and the CFOs as well, to buy into the ROI there. And I think part of it, when you get into the convincing them, the 5th yes is really finding the right vendor or partner. And where we fit in is, I think, we're a software as a service business model. We're not, incentivized by, anything other than adoption and them growing their business. It's not like we're trying to manage money ourselves or, sell additional investment products. And we're a long-term company. A lot of our companies. I was at an event. It was a couple of weeks ago, and I was preparing Craig for the discussion. It was interesting. I was looking at the financial institutions, and one of the banks was started before the U.S. Constitution. 2 of them pre-Civil War. So, these are organizations that are thinking about long-term decisions. And so, I think finding the right partner that shares in their vision is also another thing that enables us to really continue to grow and help them support their initiatives that they have underway.
That's important. When we help wealth management firms select vendors, one of the criteria is length of time the company's been in business. What's their market share? What's their reputation? That has to be taken into account.
I think that's we talk about it. We talk about referenceable clients almost every day, and I think part of our growth of the business is we don't do everything right. We have plenty of challenges as well, and but knowing that you've got a good partner that you can work through things and continue to have the right incentives, the right alignment, and you're helping them have these conversations with their clients, it starts to grow, and they continue to adopt. So it's a good thing.
I want to talk about what everyone's talking about these days, which is AI. So AI is everywhere in fintech. Things a lot of AI washing. A lot of firms are saying they're AI or putting AI in their names or saying we're AI for advisors when they're really not. But with what you're doing, you're really behind the scenes. You're not doing a lot of flashy front end work. So where is AI doing real operational benefits inside of your platform versus just prototyping or testing?
Inside our platform or for our clients?
Well, both.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd say my CTO says it best. It's like, large language models eat the world. What our clients need are, small language models that are governed. So I can speak, for us where AI is doing real work for the company is, I think in every aspect from a productivity perspective, in terms of, really being able to accelerate both the product development lifecycle as well as the software development lifecycle. You can really, move things forward. But I think in terms of from a client's perspective, it really, I don't know if you would agree with this or not. It starts with data, right? I mean, I think that's the important part, because you're right. AI is in most platforms today in some way, and I think data quality, really being able to understand, particularly in financial advice, right? Because AI hallucinates, and making sure that things are accurate and you're governed properly, but also focus on the right data is probably the most important part about that. I think what AI does is really, from our perspective, it fits in really well with the business. We've always, going back to the guy that built 50 spreadsheets, was trying to have conversations with clients. Now you can do it across both structured and unstructured data. I think, so we're ingesting data from all these different, financial institutions, custodians, et cetera, and through our process, there's also statements and CRMs and other sources as well. And I think what we found most interesting is when you can really unify that in an accurate data set, the insights that can start to surface can really help advisors do the same thing, which is have conversations with their clients, start to see things that, normally they would have to go, call somebody, download a statement, pull a file to go get that information. Now, bringing that information together and then enabling them to really have a conversation with it to start to better engage their clients, I think is an exciting thing.
Are you afraid that your clients can use AI to reproduce what you guys are doing?
I mean, I think everybody's afraid of something like what we don't know AI is going to do. In our Connected Wealth Forum, I was moderating a discussion, and what I found is that at most of our clients, a lot of there's about a third of the clients that were participating that were not even really that are using Copilot or things like that. There's about a third that are kind of starting to use other tools. And then there's a third that were like, our CEO is drinking the Kool-Aid. It's our biggest investment of the year, of 2027. This is where we're going. And the next question I'll ask them, Craig, is, okay, how are you going to get there? And their response would be like, well, first we're going to start with, unifying our data. Like, okay, well, I think that's been a project that's been around for a while. We're going to really get, focused on that. And then the next question is like, okay, when you have your data, what are you going to do? They're like, we're going to go hire an AI person. So I think that, you look at, the software industry and you look at what's happening in the public markets and private markets. I mean, certainly there's concern, but from our perspective, we're excited. We're building things faster. We're seeing, in the market, a high level of engagement, but our clients are actually coming to us, to find ways that they can actually start to leverage it. And we started this, small group of clients just to start to better understand in terms of what they were doing, or how they were using it. And a lot of it's coming from the bottom up. We're trying to solve this problem, or we want to do this. And so we're calling it more of a productivity conversation versus AI. And I go into it, I'm like, what's the most difficult thing that you're trying to figure out? And one of our clients, just and we're sharing clean prompt or accurate prompts with them so they can use what's in their own models as well. It's been pretty exciting. But I think that there's always, concerns about, where AI is going, the unknown. But I think there's also a level of excitement in terms of what it can really do in terms of productivity and some initiatives that we're helping them with to really do things that they were really, it was costing them a lot of money to do before, or was taking them a long time, that they can actually start to better, engage their clients and provide better advice.
That was a long answer. I was taking some notes while you were talking. So you mentioned it's important that AI be governed properly. We're for that 100%. We're getting a lot of inbound requests from RIAs to help them with AI governance. Like they've already started and they're sort of down the path for AI, but now they realize they don't really kind of, have an overarching understanding of how it's being managed. So we're coming in doing these AI governance audits and AI governance projects where they're really more of a compliance project, less a tech project, because you really need to have everything documented. So in case the SEC comes in, you can say, hey, we've got it all processed. We have it all documented. We have a use policy and a security policy and such. So is there anything specific around AI governance that Wealth Access is doing or that you're recommending your clients do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in terms of governance, it's you have to protect your data, right? I mean, the financial institutions that we're working with, from a privacy and security, you've got to make sure that you're protecting your client's data and really what happens with that. So I think to your point, getting a partner that could help you to make sure that you've got the right governance and in place, the right security is really important. But from our perspective, it's doing everything within your own four walls, your own governance, making sure that, particularly around like PII, like the information that you're leveraging, AI tools to help you advise your clients. You've really got to protect the data in terms of doing it. Not to change gears off the governance. I would also say call somebody like Craig to help you go through that. But it's also, I don't know if you're hearing this, but when we're hearing from firms, it's like, we're putting these tools in place, but when our advisors and everybody's kind of at a different level of experience with AI,
Oh, that's for sure.
they kind of get into it and they start trying to solve one thing, and then they're all the way over here doing things that may not be productive. So one of the things that we've found is really making sure that from and I don't know if this is necessarily governance, but more of we hear a lot of we want to use the tools that we have in place today. It's like you want to do a review or you want to an investment proposal. I'm just giving you a couple of examples, but like setting up templates, right? Making sure that like here's things that that are prefabricated that you could leverage various tools to do, or it is really something to understand versus maybe you need to have a long conversation and it leads to additional questions. But I think also making sure that people are really set up to use it the right way, and so compliance and other things, factor into that, but making sure that, you've got the right tools in place, but you actually know how to use them, I think is also really important. I'm not sure if you're seeing that as well.
Oh, definitely. We're seeing all kinds of things, firms in all different states. But one thing we hear almost consistently is our executives feel like we're falling behind. Everyone says the same thing. So everyone feels they're falling behind, no matter what state they're in, no matter how far down the road they are. But there's always a need for help, whether it's around integrations, whether it's around utilization, whether it's around organization, governance. We've been doing wealth management technology. This is our 21st year in business. There's no consulting firm with more experience than we have. So we've been doing tech stack governance and tech stack evaluations for many years. AI is just another technology. It's an extremely powerful technology that's changing the way we do things, but it is more just more tech. So it needs to be handled in the same way. Safety, security, oversight are all very similar. So in that case, we're seeing that. But I only have time for one more question, man. I told you this goes fast. So what's coming down the pike? Where do you see wealth access in, I can't even say 2 to 3 years, 18 to 24 months? What are your thoughts when it comes to AI and changes in the industry?
So, I'm really excited, and I can talk a lot about, I can address some of the technology initiatives that we have, and that we're really excited about. But I think the space that we're in today, it's really interesting. You look at the marketplace, and obviously from a wealth management, you look at the RA valuations and what's going on there. I actually think that the growth of and the importance of the wealth business, specifically in the bank space, and we work with banks of all sizes, represents a very significant opportunity. So statistics, I think less than typically around 5% of bank customers are also using their wealth management business, and you start to look at what the possibilities are there. So we're really excited about that. We're seeing significant growth in the space, and I think it's an exciting market to be in. I think generally wealth management in general is a really important business. We now are looking at it, more financial services at the enterprises that we work with, but specifically, from our technology, I think that one of the things that we're really excited about is really our clients figuring out what they really want their front door to be. And we've integrated with multiple, digital banking providers as well. And I think integrating wealth within digital banking is an important initiative that has been underway around 6 years. And if you think about it, not every bank has Jamie Dimon's what is it, 17-18 billion-dollar tech budget. So being able to provide a solution like that, to where they can better engage their clients, is a pretty significant initiative that has been underway. I think in terms of AI, to address that part of the question, we talk about connected wealth intelligence, and I think we've been able to connect data, connect wealth, connect people, but really bringing that level of intelligence to enable advisors not only just to be more productive, but to provide better advice. So we re-platformed Wealth Access. It's been underway for a couple of years, and so entire back end from a data perspective, but also our new front end. We have clients that are live, and that initiative continues to be underway. And so with our new platform, I think being able to really activate data that's been unified, it is an exciting initiative, and continue to grow the business. So finding more ways to engage. We love complex data. The more complex it is, particularly around banks going through M&A or other firms going through M&A, we specialize in that. And so continuing to help them grow their business, solve challenges that they have to really help move the industry forward.
David, you've said it all. We're out of time. Please share where our listeners can find more information about Wealth Access.
Yeah, certainly. Wealthaccess.com. You can go directly to our website and find out more information. And appreciate the time with you, Craig.
It was great talking to you, David. Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top 3 takeaways from this episode. Number 1, Wealth Access is focused on unifying enterprise wealth data, not just aggregating it. David emphasized the difference between client-side aggregation and institutional data unification across bank trust, brokerage, RIA, and other core systems. The goal is to create a single usable view that improves advisor-client conversations and supports business growth. Number 2, banks and enterprise wealth firms are under pressure to modernize without ripping out legacy systems. A big theme was the challenge of integrating old infrastructure, getting buy-in from IT, digital C-suite, and the boards, and providing ROI. David described this as the 5 yeses problem and said, Wealth Access helps firms orchestrate systems rather than replace them. And finally, AI is real, but governance and data quality matter more than hype. Both David and I stress that most firms are still figuring out practical AI use cases, and the most valuable applications are productivity, prompts, advisor support, but only if it's wrapped around by strong governance, security, and clean data frameworks. And David also sees strong demand for AI-related guidance from clients. And that's it. You've reached the end of another episode of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. Thanks for listening. But before you go, please head to our website, ezragroup.com, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, and updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you all again next time.